I think there's 1,800 metrics in the Facebook API to pull from. Not saying you should, because you'll probably break the API, but there's a lot of metrics to pull from, and you don't really need a lot of those, right? You can really focus on what are my main goals.
Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to Growth Mentors, the podcast where we share snackable growth hacks, strategies, and best practices in how to drive maximum marketing impact and grow your bottom line. I'm your host, Matt LeBlanc, and today we are going to be talking about the best metrics to be judging marketing success across multiple sources of data with Tom Murray, the Managing Director of Data and Analytics at Jump 450. What's happening, Tom?
How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you, man. I'm just going to let kind of everybody know a little bit about you, and also in an effort to sort of embarrass you. Tom's probably one of the smarter people that I interact with on a regular basis. I just want to kind of start this talk, and just speaking for myself and probably most of the audience, I'm conversational and smart, but I'm fluent and stupid. So don't be afraid to just come at it a little simple. But basically, Tom, why don't you tell us what you're going to be walking us through here today?
So my goal is to try and help you figure out what are the right metrics to actually judge your campaigns by, because we have a sea of metrics, hundreds of metrics across different sources, different channels, different platforms, and sometimes it gets really difficult to figure out what metric should I be looking at, which metric should I be caring about, and which metrics should I avoid. And historically, there's been hundreds of metrics that we could use, but in reality, we should be distilling it down to just a couple metrics to actually use.
So Tom, what are some of the problems that people have if they're not looking at the right metrics? Who should be listening to this?
Everyone. Brand marketers, CFOs, CEOs, marketing teams. If you're not looking at the right metrics, you might not be measuring the right outcomes, but also it's very easy to be very unprofitable if you're not taking the right metrics into account. So you may think you're doing okay. You might have the illusion of success, but in reality, there could be some metrics lurking there that aren't actually that strong or that good, and you could be going down a path of disaster.
Yeah. Wow. All right. You hooked me. What have marketers been using historically to measure campaigns?
Yeah. So I started marketing over 10 years ago, before things called pixels even existed. So I started running Facebook ads when the mobile feed didn't even exist. It was when we still had like walls and people were poking each other. But now pixels came out around, I think 2013, I want to say, so about 10, 11 years ago. And that was magic at that point. We've never had insight into campaign performance like that. When I first started out, it was always how much did we spend, and that was about it. That's all we knew. Then pixels came out, and a little tracking code on the websites that could track how much did the person spend, how many purchases did we get, how many site visitors, all that kind of extra information down in a campaign ad set or even ad level, which was just information we've never really seen before. So marketers kind of got spoiled by this, myself included, because we would actually see what was working in real time. We didn't have to wait 2 months, 3 months, a year for some advanced data science models to be used to figure out if campaigns were successful or not. We were able to see it in real time, sometimes on the same day, or if not the next day. Was my spend effective or not? So that was great. Then there was also people using UTM parameters, which are extra strings of code at the end of URLs that are ignored by the user, but it helps us figure out where does that click come from. Did it come from Google, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, wherever it might be? And that helps you figure out on a last click or a last touch basis where credit was given. All right, so pixels and UTMs are two different things, but that's really how most people are measuring, because it's all we really have had historically for the past 10 or so years. The only problem with that is UTM's very clicky, which means CTV, Facebook, display channels that don't generate as many clicks as, say, Google search or shopping campaigns get hurt by these. So a lot of times these measurement solutions are convenient, but they may not be actually telling you what you want to see, because a lot of times those systems will be biased towards the channels that drive clicks versus not clicks. But as we know, why are there billboards, TV ads? You don't click those, but we know those work as well. So a lot of this measurement's been flawed over the years, but it's the best we've had, right? Because, it'd be nice to be able to always know exactly what ad is performing at what point in time, and pixels usually can help you with that, but then they have some issues as well.
So we've been relying on pixels and UTMs, which are give us a lot of information, but are somewhat problematic, right? But sort of take us a little bit deeper into our story here. But then
Apple had to get in the way of everything for the sake of user privacy, and they started introducing a lot of privacy blockers, right? So everyone's familiar probably by this point of iOS 14 with all the changes around data signal loss or not being able to track certain things. And once it happened, reporting just became honestly a big mess. A lot of issues, a lot of gaps, pretty much everywhere.
Can you give us like just a little bit more context around iOS 14? I feel like this gets mentioned in passing, like really, like it's like very shorthand at this point. But for anyone who like doesn't have like good context of kind of what that was, it feels so significant.
Yeah, at this point, it's just a scapegoat. It's the easy thing to say, oh, iOS 14 happened, so everything kind of started failing from there. But in reality, it was because we lost audience tracking. So people weren't getting tracked at the levels they used to. So in the past, you could really track somebody for, a couple of months or even up to 6 months. Now you can really only get it to like 7 days. So retargeting pools suffered. So you couldn't keep sending people ads down the funnel as if you know where they've been, right? If you know someone has added to cart, you want to send them a specific message versus someone who hasn't even seen an ad before. So you've lost audience tracking and retargeting pools. A lot of conversions were blocked because there were limits to the data that Apple would send back to Facebook and Google and so on. So for example, on Facebook, we lost visibility to age, gender, country, state, and all these other breakdowns that we used to use to see where are the pockets of performance happening. So we lost that. We also lost just the ability to see the purchases itself, because Facebook and Google, they use modeling to figure out how many people have bought, and they were basically blindfolded, or they were kind of like had one hand tied behind their back when the Pixel went out, so they weren't getting full visibility that they used to. So in the beginning, when this first happened, all those conversions were just gone. They had no way to replace them. Over time, though, they have gotten better with this by figuring out modeling through like AI models and machine learning to figure out, based on smaller data sets, how they can extrapolate out. So now, 4 years later, or however long it's been, it's much better now. Like it's, within like a 10% variance, but in the beginning, people were seeing 50% differences in both directions because the models were either overestimating or underestimating, and you never knew which way it was because it wasn't always consistent from brand to brand or day to day. So it's kind of like a coin flip. Oh, are my metrics good today? Yes or no? We didn't know, right? So iOS kind of just created havoc on anyone who ran any mobile ads at all.
So that was kind of the impact of iOS 14, yeah? What solutions have come about since then? You said machine learning and those types of things, lots of different tools.
Yeah, a lot of tools came out mainly because people started not trusting the Facebook numbers, the Google numbers, because they're already grading their homework to an extent. However, with the models not showing great performance anymore, people lost trust across the board. So new tools came out to try and help with that. Now, a lot of these are a little bit more niche. Some of them are more like Shopify specific tools because it was easy to build on the Shopify ecosystem for like the D2C direct to consumer brand. So tools like Triple Whale, Northbeam came out, but then there's other solutions like Rocker Boxes and other MMM kind of MTA tools in the world that kind of came out. The problem is they're just really expensive and they're very convoluted and complicated, and a lot of the times they're black boxes, so you kind of have to trust with that system. So I've lost trust in one system, and then I'm going to blindly trust a new system was always tough. And like the fact that I'm also paying them a lot of money to do it as well, where I'm like, I can't even validate any of the numbers, which was an issue with Facebook, but you're not gaining that back by using a third-party tool. But all these tools came out to try and help you see through all this and give you actual data to optimize off of, which when they first came out, probably yes, but as time has gone on, because Facebook and Google and all the bigger channels have gotten better over time, everything's starting to equalize a lot more where you may not need those third-party tools.
So the third-party tools, not really necessary at this point, yeah?
Probably not. Not to say that they're not good or they don't have benefits, but we did a lot of correlation analysis to understand, actually, are the platform metrics doing well? Like, can we trust those now? Because even though we've lost trust in the past, that doesn't mean we can't regain trust as things have improved, right? The AI models have gotten better. The machine learning models have gotten better. So what I did was I took a lot of our different brands' revenue data from their back-end site. So the actual sales that happened, not what Facebook says, not what Google Analytics says, just what the actual site sales were, both from revenue and new customer revenue, because a lot of our clients, not just are focusing on revenue, but also how do we drive new customers and new customer revenue, and then run a bunch of correlations between that and what the ad platforms themselves are saying. So what does Facebook say actually happened? What does Google actually say happened? What does TikTok say happened? And I won't say this is a surprising result, but to people that have lost trust in those numbers, this might be surprising, where I was seeing correlations of, depending on the brand, between 84 and 95% of correlation between what the platforms say was happening and what the back end was saying was happening. So what that meant is I could trust those, because on a correlation level, if you're over 0.7, that's usually pretty good. Some people act on 0.5 or higher, but I want to act on 0.8 or more. Generally, at every single brand I ran, the lowest brand I had was 0.81, which tells me that I can actually probably trust what the platforms are telling me, and I don't need the third-party tools to try and tell me the same thing. Now, I ran the same correlation for the third-party tools, and they were all in the 90s as well, which is great, but that also tells me I don't need that tool, because if I could rely on the thing that is free and actionable and easy to use, I'd rather have that. So I don't have to learn all the extra models that they have, the black boxes of the world. I don't have to trust that. I could just use what's easy. And the most important piece, though, is Facebook and Google have that data to optimize off of already. If you're using this third-party tool, Facebook doesn't see it, which means you now have to manually intervene to try and optimize, which the algorithms now don't like. They don't like when we touch any button. So the fewer buttons we can use and the more data we can use from the ecosystem that you're already in, say like Facebook or Google, the better you'll probably be. And now knowing that these correlations exist makes me feel confident that I can trust these pixels again. I've regained my trust in Facebook. I've regained my trust in Google. And I don't need these, expensive third-party tools, but some of them are, $10,000, $20,000 a month, which a lot of brands can't afford. Some of them are only $1,000, $2,000, but unless you're spending, $500,000 or more, you probably don't need to use these kind of tools.
Right. So what should people be focusing on instead to sort of cut through the metric noise?
So there's a lot of metrics, and they're all at different levels, right? There's ad metrics. So a lot of times you hear things like hook rate or hold rate, like how many people are watching my ads and how long are they viewing it. But then you'll see CTR, CPC, CPM. There's been a lot of studies in the past, like years ago, that showed no correlations between click through and things like that to eventual purchases. But then people have been using even more metrics now, because I think there's 1,800 metrics in the Facebook API to pull from. Not saying you should, because you'll probably break the API, but there's a lot of metrics to pull from, and you don't really need a lot of those, right? You can really focus on what are my main goals: the purchases, the revenue, the return on ad spend, AOVs, and things like that from the platforms itself. However, when you try and measure that across the different channels, right? So Facebook and Google, Pinterest, TikTok, Twitter, they all look at them in different attribution windows, which means you can never really compare everything together. Because in Facebook, you might have a view-through conversion, which is somebody who views it but doesn't click. In Google, they're more likely to be click-based conversions. So it's tough to compare between Facebook, Google, and all the other platforms. And then also, you have issues with overlap. You can see a Facebook ad, you can see a Google ad. Both are going to take 100% credit for it, and now you have an issue. This is why those tools kind of start to exist, to try and figure out where the credit goes. However, I try and view the marketing through the lens of the business, which I don't care where the credit goes. As an agency, if we're only running Facebook or Google, we're incentivized to likely say, hey, Facebook's doing great, your other partners aren't doing well. That doesn't help me, because if it's not actually driving business performance for the brand, they're not going to like any of the partners that they're working with, right? So my goal is, how do I make the business metrics look strong and keep growing, right? A lot of companies that eventually go public, it's because they're showing growth month over month, year over year in their overall top line metrics. So where I try and focus the brands on is forget about CPC, CPM, CTRs. You can game the system to get higher CTRs. Doesn't mean it's a better ad. You can game the system to get better CPMs. Just means you're probably going broader. What I rather focus on is your business metrics, so people call MER, media efficiency ratio. It's like a blended return on ad spend. How much did we make? How much did we spend? And what's that ratio? You should set a target ratio for that. And as long as you're above it, you can keep spending. You can then use the platform data directionally to figure out where to place it. But in reality, you need to make sure your ratio is good. Some will use CAC instead, cost per new customer. I can only spend $100 to acquire new customers. If I'm acquiring them at 90, I can keep spending, right? Some brands, in a perfect world, take it a step further, and they use margins, so contribution margin, things like that, to really get a sense of their product costs, their margins, their expenses. That should go into it. That's a much deeper exercise that a lot of brands don't take, but they should, because that'll help you determine where is my profitability actually lay. So then you can actually make sure you're measuring properly against it. So focusing on just 2 metrics or 3 metrics is okay. You don't need 100. It's just focusing on 1, 2, or 3 metrics like MER, CAC, contribution profit, whatever it might be. As long as you pick that North Star metric, it'll be much easier for all teams to figure out how's performance doing. Are we doing well? Are we doing badly? Do we need to make pivots? And should we keep doing what we're doing? We actually then took a look at this, I think last year. We looked at like 50 different brands that we had, and we kind of grouped them into their goals. Are they simple goals? Are they like medium goals? Or are they complex goals by client? And what we clearly saw was the brands that have simple goals, which is easily measurable and fewer goals. Scaled faster, and they spent much more. Versus the ones that had too many complex goals to try and count and figure out, because then there was just a lot of infighting between, oh, well, my CPM is good, but my CTR is not good. And it just got in the way of focusing on the one cardinal metric. Like, you should have that metric pulled up every day and tracking against it, and then see how it's changing each day. If you do that, you're more likely to succeed in the long run because you're really laser focused on whatever that goal is versus getting tied down in the minutia of all these other metrics and no.
Yeah, Tom, it seems so reasonable what you're saying, but I mean, I know as well as you do that a lot of people can still be very resistant to this approach, I feel like. So let's maybe talk through like where that resistance comes from.
I think it's that spoiling that I talked about in the beginning, which is everyone's been so used to seeing ad A versus ad B. What's my click-through rate? What's my CPM? What's my CPA on the ad level? And it's tough to then say, oh, this one has a better CPA, so it must be better. I have to turn the other one off. Or some ads have different purposes, and you may not see it. Like, some ads just spend a lot of money, and it may not have a good performance against it, but there's some marketers actually that their main KPI they look at is spend on an ad, because the algorithm knows more than we do. And even though the metrics may say one thing, it knows in the background it needs to keep serving this ad because it's driving better outcomes. So because people have been spoiled with that pixel data, it's tough to then move away to something like this. This almost feels like a step backwards because you're no longer worrying about channel level attribution, which makes it tougher to say, where should I be spending my money? That's where you need more advanced models on top of this, like media mix modeling or things like that, which is a completely different level of data science. But it's tough to move off of what you're used to. And then also, not only that, if you measure things differently, there's been internal buy-in to hearing numbers in a certain fashion. So what do I mean by that? Let's say they're used to seeing a $4 return on Facebook, and they just hear that number. Then in the future, if you change that, and now they're suddenly seeing like a $2 or a $3 return on Facebook, they think Facebook is wrong, but then or that Facebook isn't performing as well, right? But in reality, it's the new customer revenue or the cost per new customer is going down, but Facebook looks like it's going down as well. There may not be a problem. In reality, Facebook may be acting just more as an upper funnel channel that isn't getting the pixel benefits that you're used to seeing, because you may be optimizing differently, which is okay. Like, I don't need every channel to take credit for every sale. I don't want that. I just want my business to go up, revenue, purchases, and I want it to absolutely go up instead of relatively go up. So a lot of people, they ROI themselves out of business because they say, I need a $3 return. But simple math says, if I get a $2 return, but I can quadruple my volume, I'm going to net out more absolute dollars, because most likely what happens is, as you spend more and you make more sales, you're probably not incrementally increasing all your other costs that I talked about before. Your rent didn't quadruple when you had 4 times the amount of sales. Your staff didn't quadruple when you had 4 times the amount of sales. You probably were able to maybe get by with doubling some of those expenses. So as you start scaling up more, you're actually growing your absolute numbers, even though your rate numbers are going down. So people like to get stuck on these rate-based metrics of a flat return ad spend, when in reality it should be at absolute level. Like, would you rather have a $5 return and make $100,000, or a $3 return but you've got $500,000? I'd rather $500,000.
Tom, do you think it's also fair to say that some of the resistance to sort of like simplifying your focus on metrics comes from too many cooks? Or comes from a disconnect between maybe the top and the bottom, the shareholders or the founders and the people that are hands-on keyboards?
Could be. A lot of cooks is one of them. However, I'd recommend we need all the cooks in the kitchen, because oftentimes as an agency, we'll get asked, what should our goal be? I would love to tell you the number, but I can't answer that question accurately because I don't know so many of the other pieces of the business. I don't know your fixed costs. I don't know your rent. I don't know your variable costs. I don't know your margin per SKU. These are things brands normally know, but it may sit in multiple teams. You may have the operations team who handles some of the inventory planning. The finance team maybe handles the profitability of the cash flow. Then you've got the CMO, who may be a creative CMO who's got the big brand vision, but they may not even focus on any finance metrics. You might have the CEO that just cares about dollars and cents. All these people need to get aligned and in the room, though, to create these goals. It's not one job of any of those one teams, and it's definitely not the job of an agency to come up with a number. That's just setting yourself up probably for failure, because I don't have all the inputs, and you wouldn't want to make a forecast based on only limited inputs. So yes, it's cooks in the kitchen, but they actually all need to be involved to create the right numbers, or else we don't even know if we're succeeding or not.
So this is perfect. So we've got kind of like the philosophical solution here, and we also have sort of like the maybe a little bit of an obstacle with all of the different cooks, but needing to be able to work together. So I wonder if we can take all that, and can you sort of recommend, how does one determine what the metric they should be focusing on is? That was a complicated way to ask that question. How does one determine which metric is their North Star?
It's a tough question to answer, because you don't know what their main goal is, right? Like if the company's goal is to, let's say it's a bootstrapped company that has no PE funding with it, no venture capital money, and they're just trying to grow month over month, their numbers may just be that contribution profit at the end. Like, how much money did we make after paying all the expenses and the ad spend? And that's perfectly fine. There's a bunch of companies, though, that their goal is IPOing or selling. A lot of those companies, think of the Caspers of the world from years ago, their goal was just, how do we get new customers? Didn't matter how much we cost, how much we spent to get them, but just constantly, month over month or year over year or quarter over quarter, show constant growth. We had 1,000 customers last year, now it's 1,500, and some just focus on those top line numbers. A lot of those have been proven probably not to be the best way to go about it, because a lot of those companies are actually highly unprofitable, and surprise alert, profitable companies are probably better to grow. So I'd probably more focus on those contribution profits and things like that, where you're taking in your margins into account to make sure you're actually running a profitable business. Doesn't mean you have to be profitable on day one, right? Most people go into business, they know they're going to lose money in the first couple of years. That's okay. Can't do that forever, though. You eventually need to turn a profit. So I'd more look at the absolute metrics from actual profits that's coming in. And then the other one key piece that's just very important to know about is when you get that profit, like how quickly does it come in? Because then that will tell you, first is my cash flow, how much can I actually realistically spend in this month, right? It's one thing to be profitable, but if you get that money over a year, because you need people to keep subscribing every month, versus upfront, that's two very different things around when you could spend it. You might be able to spend the same amount, it's just, can I spend it more sooner than later? Each company has to make their own decision based on their unique set of expenses, team size, right? Some companies are, 8, 9 figures, but they have 10 people on their team. Others have 100 people, right? So they may have way more overhead. Those are things you'll need to take into account. And it's not a simple, just plug in X, Y, and Z to come out with the proper one. But there's a decision tree, right? You start doing that. Oh, do I have a lot of overhead? Yes or no? Then next questions come from that. So you have to go through all analysis of pretty much every line item on your budget to see, what are all my costs? How would they change? What happens when we scale up? And only then can you really figure out what my goals can be, and then if they need to change.
Well, Tom, let me ask you this, because we do this all the time with clients, right? Clients come in and they're focused on lots of different metrics and sort of in the weeds, and it's a really complicated kind of puzzle. And then we're sort of guiding them towards this philosophy. So do you feel like there are any common trends or anything like that you see within these conversations when figuring out which metric to focus on?
Most of the time they want to move towards those, but there's hesitancy from what we talked about before. Like, there may not be buy-in from other people on their team, or they may have preconceived notions and biases from previous work, previous agencies they might have dealt with, where they have to measure a certain way. And then there's this internal politics also, where they've always measured it a certain way, so they can't get that, they can't be a change agent that fast, right? So sometimes you have to get buy-in on the topic with your main point of contact, and then give them the ammo to help fight the fight internally with you. It's not always our battle to fight, but I always want to give them the ammo to help on that front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tom, why don't you leave us with just one little piece here? Paint us the nightmare picture. What happens if we don't focus on one North Star metric? Remind us why this idea is so impactful, or can have such a great impact on your business.
Yeah, it's already hard enough to run a profitable business when everything goes right. It's tough to run the business, though, when I don't know how much I should be spending. I don't know if my ads are working, profitable, or if my business is strong. Like, you need to figure that out first. And as marketers, we want to help with that, but we can only do so much on that front, right? So like, you need to be profitable first and foremost. That's how companies need to operate and should be operating. So if you don't have these metrics in place, it just makes everyone's jobs harder. The brand team's time is more spent on trying to figure out, are we doing okay? Our time buying ads is tougher because we might be having to analyze 3 or 4 different sources of data and then trying to figure out which one do we optimize off of or use. That just takes a lot of time. When you have a lot of time there, then all that time is getting spent on what I call low-value tasks versus high-value tasks. I want to focus on strategy, analysis, and optimization, but if half my day is pulling data together and just trying to like look at it to try and just figure out what to even look at, and I'm in a sea of tables, next thing you know, I've wasted half the time that I could be that could be better spent on product development, creative strategy, landing page changes, things that actually move the business forward versus just sitting in Excel all day trying to make sense of, hundreds of numbers.
Excellent. Exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so much. This is Tom Murray, the Managing Director of Data and Analytics at Jump 450. If you are looking to explode your own digital growth, you can get in touch with Jump 450 in the link below in the description. Our website is www.jump450.com. And do not forget to subscribe to Growth Mentors for more weekly episodes and secrets that you can steal from us. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Tom.